Hey there. So we're now starting the peer review assignment part of this, and so I wanted to give like a little bit of feedback, instructions on this, right? And so, as you'll recall, you were asked to explain the importance of studying theory, and then provide criteria, and then explain like why it's important to have criteria, right? So when you're going through evaluating everyone's assignment, right, know that when we're thinking about theory, right, the goal is to provide a systematic explanation of behavior, right? So if we can identify why people commit crime, right, for some reason, that suggests that we can understand the problem at play, and that maybe we can, if we understand the process, we can identify possible solutions to correcting crime, right? So if we are able to predict the world, we can go about solving it, right? If there's anything that doesn't, kind of follow within those lines, right, that's simply incorrect information and needs to be pointed out to your fellow student, right? And also, if that's something that you wrote and you believed was correct, it's simply not the case, right? So it's important to correct these mistakes, right, so they don't pop up on the final paper and then I'm like, wow, this person didn't really learn anything, or they never reviewed their notes and so on, right? The other part is when we start talking about criteria, it's a critical part of it, and what oftentimes happens is that people are sometimes confused, or they haven't reviewed their notes, or they wrote it quickly, and it's not, misunderstanding something, right? So keep in mind that for a successful, someone gets full 12 points on an answer, they should be able to list whatever the criteria is that they're talking about for each one that they've selected, define what it means, and then explain what it means, right? So those three elements are what I'm going to be looking for in the final paper, and it's something that you should be looking to help out your peers, right? So it should also be correct, right, is another thing too. So if someone's listening, defining, explaining, but they're simply wrong, then that's not really useful, right? I'll tell you the easiest example that this pops up all the time. For the life of me, I don't understand why. This happens across multiple terms. But when we think about parsimony, right? Parsimony is the simplicity of an explanation, right? So if there aren't a lot of moving pieces into an explanation of behavior, right? And so we want a simple explanation, a parsimonious explanation, because it means that the theory should be relatively easy to test. It's easy to understand and comprehend, and it's going to be more useful because of that, because there aren't these moving pieces. Because if you introduce a lot of complexity, there's a lot of places where that can go wrong. It will be simply incorrect. So again, parsimony is about simplicity. The other part is that people will often confuse comprehend with comprehensiveness. Those are not the same thing. So, but a criteria is comprehensiveness, where we're looking at can a theory explain a wide range of behaviors, right? So if it can explain why white people commit crime, or women, or can a theory explain why some people engage in prostitution, why do some people stop committing crime, things like that. When we want comprehensiveness, not comprehension, comprehensiveness, because this indicates that a theory can explain a wide range of behavior and it's more useful to us, right? Speaking of usefulness, right, we also want to consider policy implications. Policy implications, when we're talking about, is like, what if the theory is true in predicting empirical behavior, like behavior of crime, then we can create a policy solution to prevent it from happening in the future, right? So this would be good, because if we were able to do something with an explanation, we were able to prevent something, and we have probably done a pretty good job then, right? And so we want to have policies that can stop negative behavior. So that's why we want policy implications, right? Because it's going to be useful. We think about empirical validity, right? We want to have basically a whole range of studies and evidence that says this explanation is correct, or there is support for this theory, right? Because if there isn't empirical validity, then we really can't say the theory is correct, right? So we want to have empirical validity because it's a body of evidence that suggests that that this theory and thinking way is correct, and that these are the issues we should be focused on when we're developing policy, or when we're trying to refine a theory, right? So that part is really important to understand. Related to that, right, is testing or testability, right? So if we have a theory, right, a lot of times, these are really ethereal. They're kind of hard to comprehend, and sometimes they're written, they're a bit esoteric and meant for only a certain amount of people. But what we want to do, right, is that if someone defines something such as deterrence, right, or we're talking about certainty of punishment, which is something that we'll cover later, we need to find a way to be able to test that, right? So if we take this abstract concept, but we can operationalize it, so we can, it's a variable or something that we can manipulate in the real world, this is going to help us develop empirical validity to either in favor of a theory or not in favor of a theory, right? So we want to have testability in order to assess the implications and find out if a theory is true or not. When we think about clarity, we want clarity for an explanation to be clear because this makes it easier to test. It makes it easier to understand, and it's not like something that you can confuse for a different thing, right? So if we have something that is clear, easy to understand, it's easier to test, it's easier to gain empirical validity. It's also easier, developing policy solutions based off of that. So those tend to be the ones that people focus on a lot. And so if anyone is wrong and they don't, include those items, then they should be marked accordingly, and you should deduct points accordingly, right? And the last part of the assignment is that when we start talking about why it's important to have criteria, it's mainly because we need to distinguish, it's what we use to distinguish if a theory is good or correct over other theories, right? And so it's like a weighing mechanism. If we do not have this weighing mechanism, then there's no way to decide if a theory is good or not, and then it just kind of becomes like a bunch of thought experiments, which are not really necessarily useful, right? So with that said, then if someone cannot articulate that, they should be docked points accordingly. And you should not award them points, right? In that case then, right? And you should also point this out in a kind but fair way, right? Second point I want to bring up too is that, there are going to be people, and probably some people who are going to inflate the grade of people where, maybe they don't understand their own content, or maybe they don't understand, they just don't want to be the point, giving points away or something like that. And know that you are only doing a disservice to your fellow classmates by doing that, because you're not helping them grow and improve. And at the same time, if you are in a position where you're like, well, I don't know if this is correct, I'm not going to worry about it, and that suggests you also don't have a good comprehension of the material and that you should probably revisit it, right? Now, you shouldn't be mean about it, right? But if you are not being critical, if you are not, pointing areas of growth, then you're not helping that person grow either, right? And so this whole process is about seeing what the work of other people do, seeing where they've gone wrong, looking at your own work and deciding where you could have been better or not, and then changing from there. As a final note, I will say that, I do have final say on all grades, right, regardless of what they say. So if you are looking at some feedback and some comments, you want some greater clarification, you want to maybe contest your grade, that's perfectly fine. Here's what you need to do. So in this aspect then, you need to say, here's the comment, right? Here's what they said. Here's why I think I'm right. Will you look at me again? Do not just email me, hey, look at this again because I disagree with it, right? I want you to tell me why I should look at it again, why that person was wrong, or why you think you deserve more credit, right? I just want you to justify what you're saying it's right. The point of this is that, if you disagree with something, you should be willing to ask for it, and you should be willing to back up what you say, right? It's an important skill to have in life, right? Is to be able to justify what you want instead of just asking for it. Now with that, I'll go ahead and end this video, and hopefully this was helpful, useful, and if it's not, well, I'm sorry. I'll try to do my best. But I guess until then, I'll see you all in the next video.